Okay, hey. All right. I have a presentation about the work of the Powell Arts Center, which is an arts and cultural center that we opened in Boston's Chinatown last year. I'm going to not do it because I just was really, what Aviva was talking about really appealed to me, so I would like to kind of tell you the story a little bit about Chinatown, a little bit about my organization and how that all came to be. I'm going to try to do it quickly so we can get to the larger conversation. So forgive me if I stumble on some of these things. So my name is Giles. I'm the executive director of an organization called the Boston Chinatown Neighborhood Center, BCNC. We are first and foremost I didn't mean for that. We're first and foremost a family-centered social services organization. So we were started in 1969 by a small group of parents at the local elementary school who really took inspiration from the community schools movement that was coming, I don't know, I guess this thing is the thing. That was coming out of New York, in which inner city schools, families that were at that school really wanted to use those schools as not just schools, but as community centers. And so BCNC came out of that, where families organized to create after-school programming and eventually early, preschool and adult programs and so on. Now, close to 50 years later, we're a larger organization, we're a different organization, but that kind of connection to the grassroots is still in our DNA, and you can still see it in the organization that we are. So last year we opened the Powell Arts Center, and I guess the reason why it's important for me to tell you the history of this is that this is kind of couched in this bigger story about Chinatown, not just Boston's Chinatown, but Chinatown across the country. So I'll tell you a little bit about Chinatown. Boston's Chinatown is really one of the last original Chinatowns that is still kind of vibrant and robust. By original Chinatowns, I mean Chinatowns popped up in many cities around the country. This was cities that were all connected to by Chinese labor that came in through California and eventually rode the Transcontinental Railroad, which they helped build across the country and kind of spread out everywhere. The Chinatown in Boston was kind of the last stop on that train ride, and they just felt, the story is that people continued to not get off in certain cities because they thought those cities were too racist, and they thought they might find a better place at the end of the train line, which was Boston. So we all know that story. So they walked a few blocks and pitched tents on an alley that has now been renamed in their honor. And eventually that grew into the Chinatown that it is. And where they started, where they pitched tents, those original kind of Chinatown residents, that is still part of the Chinatown neighborhood. In other cities like New York, you had a big Chinatown in Manhattan, which allowed for the Chinese immigrant population, the low-income Chinese immigrant population that was in the city, to feel like they had a home base where they could kind of go out and explore further and further. And so now you have a larger Chinatown in Queens, Flushing, Queens, than you do in Manhattan. You have a larger Chinatown in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, than you do in Manhattan. So in most cities, the larger Chinatowns are actually no longer in the downtown area of the city. Los Angeles is the same, San Francisco has 4 Chinatowns, Chicago already. So in Boston, we do have other neighborhoods or other parts of the region that have large Chinese populations. Quincy is a place that comes to mind. But there's something about Boston's Chinatown that to me is very special. So, for my family, I think we have looked to Chinatown as a place where we got services, where my mother worked, where I got my first job. And this was something that connected us to a larger community of Chinese immigrants when we didn't necessarily have that in the neighborhood where we lived. And so it really gave us kind of the power to be able to build on something and feel like we belong. And so the story of the Powell Arts Center is really one that is couched in the story of gentrification of Boston and cities kind of nationwide. The Chinese population in Boston's Chinatown is no longer a majority of that neighborhood. It's less than 50% of Chinatown is Asian residents. The share of white residents of Chinatown has grown over the last 15, however many years. From the 2000 to the 2010 census, it went from about 40% to now over 60% of the population. That in itself is part of a much larger macroeconomic story, but how that impacts Chinatown is that people that would traditionally live there, low-income recent immigrants, no longer can afford to live there. And so what happens when you get further and further out from the place where you feel at home is that you feel disconnected and that you have less access to services. And it makes it more and more of a production to try to get into the places where there are things that speak to you, your family, and your culture. So we created the Arts Center because we didn't want people to only come to Chinatown to seek help or to do transactional business, like to eat, to shop, to get medical services, to get social services and counseling. We also wanted it to be a place where they had celebration and a feeling of home. And that we felt, by using arts as a way to kind of heal, there would be an opportunity to give people that kind of community where they couldn't find it where they live. I have a whole other thing to tell you, but I'll see if I have an opportunity to tell you during the Q&A, or if you're really interested in the specific history from 50 years ago, you can come talk to me afterward. But I will pass this on to Greg and allow us to get into the bigger conversation. Thank you.